that today is the official launching, and so we feel really excited. In December, the last December, we were in Montreal, and during the COP15, we announced the initiative. Elizabeth, we were there together, and it was very important for us. We really were at the beginning of the way, and now we are moving forward, but still trying to really implement many things that we announced. And we think that we are in a very good position now to say that this is going to be a success. This is an unprecedented initiative because the three institutions that we are participating here, BirdLife International, Audubon, and CAF, we have very different mandates, but at the same time, all of us want the same thing, which is to protect the environment, to reach the protection of the 30% of the ecosystems that was agreed upon in Montreal. And we really feel very committed with this objective, but we have very different mandates, and the extraordinary things that we are working together now, and we think that we need to go together in order to reach the protection we want. And in this case, we can say that birds are our partners too. It's Audubon, BirdLife International, CAF, and the birds. The birds as the fourth party here. These days, we are witnessing incredible discussions here in New York on sustainable development. We have been talking about the need for a new international financial system. There are many discussions, and we consider that these discussions are really necessary in order to really reach our objectives, our objective of protecting the environment and mobilizing financial resources to the same. CAF is a public development institution, a public development bank, and we were 2 weeks ago in Cartagena. There was an important meeting for the public development banks. And we all discovered that the financial system we have been working on for many years in the Bretton Woods needs to change. And it's important that we have innovative instruments, but especially to have partnerships that really are new and create new opportunities. We consider that the most important thing of this initiative is something that has been stressed these days here in New York, which is the important role of science and technology. Not only finance, but science and technology should be an important part of our action. And this is exactly the American Flyway Initiatives: science, technology, and finance. And I would add one additional thing. People should be at the center of all these initiatives. We need to work with local communities, with indigenous communities, and people need to understand what are we talking about. Sometimes we talk about zero emissions, net zero, nature-based solutions, and sometimes it's very difficult to explain what are we talking about. What is this? We are talking about things that are very close to people's lives. We need to talk about birds. Birds is something that people really understand. So what we consider is that this initiative is really very important to make people understand what is the fragility of our ecosystems. Another important thing is that the regional approach is key. Last week, we were in Madrid and in Santiago de Compostela. CAF was there, and there was an important meeting of European ministers of finance with all the Latin American ministers of finance. And it was stressed that the financial system should be devoted to promote a green transition, not only in Europe, but also in Latin American countries. In this concept of regional approach, the hemispheric approach of American Flyway Initiative is really, really very important, because there are 8 flyways that prove that frontiers doesn't exist in America. So why this initiative? Why American Flyway Initiatives? First, because birds are very good indicators of the fragility of the ecosystems. We are working with birds in order to identify what are the ecosystems where we should put our resources. There are more than 500 species in danger. 90 of them are migratory. So we need to really devote our resources to that. Our objective with this initiative is that 10% of the migratory birds are protected. And we want to identify 30 sites in 10 years where we should implement our projects. We need to identify what is the bird risk, which is something new now. What is the bird risk? This is a very important indicator for us. With the help of birds, we can identify the most fragile ecosystems and focus our efforts there. Healthy ecosystems for birds are healthy ecosystem for people, and we all need to work for the health of humans. What kind of projects are we identifying? We are identifying projects in infrastructures, agriculture, aquaculture, coastal and marine ecosystem restoration, water, waste, tourism, regenerative tourism, urban development, blue economy. All these projects will have a positive impact on birds, or should have a positive impact on birds. So what we are launching today is this initiative that is very, very exciting for all of us. This year we have identified at least 3 projects. We want to begin with these 3 pilot projects with innovative financing mechanisms. Again, what we want to do is really to work together with Audubon and with BirdLife International in this initiative that mixes up science, technology, and finance. We want to listen and to observe the environment by using technology and by mobilizing financing, identifying opportunities and challenges, identifying the priority places where we need to work, and above all, to mobilize finances to really make possible that we protect these ecosystems. So this is my pleasure today to introduce this panel and to really be with you, and thank you very much for coming. Now we will have a very interesting discussion, but first I think we should listen to Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth, for inviting me to this introduction, and please have the floor as a CEO of Audubon. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here. So a few years ago, it would have been a rare sight to see thought leaders from the financial sector sharing the stage with environmental leaders, all strategizing about bird conservation. And it didn't happen because there wasn't a need. It didn't happen because we didn't see that our interests overlapped. But today, because of the global crises around climate and around biodiversity loss, we have basically opened our eyes to the fact that the world is smaller than we realized. We're all interconnected, and every life form on Earth is or will be very soon impacted by our climate crisis and climate impacts. So as you said, this visionary alliance that we formed between CAF, between National Audubon Society, and between BirdLife International is really extraordinary. And I think it demonstrates what you can do when you focus on your common interests rather than your differences. And so when you think about this initiative, think about the entire Western Hemisphere across the Americas. This is stretching from the tip of Chile up to the Arctic Circle in Alaska, and it's covering 35 countries across the Americas, enhancing conditions for birds and for people across that entire geography. So every year, millions of birds move between their summer and their winter grounds. And as they move between these grounds, imagine if you're a bird and you're leaving your wintering grounds and you arrive at your summer breeding grounds, only to find that those grounds are threatened or perhaps they're already destroyed. This is a real issue, and this is why the Americas Flyways Initiative is so important. It basically allows us to take into account the full life cycle of birds across the Americas and to really make a difference here in terms of this work. And so I want to tell you a story about a bird. This is a bird that is common, but it is in steep decline across North America in part because of habitat loss and because of climate impacts. So this bird is the whimbrel. The whimbrel is a large shorebird. It's found on every continent on Earth except for in Antarctica. And in the Americas, the whimbrel oftentimes can range from the tip of Chile up to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Canada. So some whimbrels will fly 3,000 miles before they stop at a site to rest and to refuel. Imagine if you're a whimbrel and you fly 3,000 miles and you stop to get some food, only to find that your feeding grounds are destroyed. Sadly, this is not an uncommon story. This is happening across the Americas. It's happening across the Americas, not just for birds that are threatened and endangered, but it's also happening for common species like blackbirds and hummingbirds, and of course, our dear whimbrel. So one of the neat things is Audubon has a platform called the Bird Migration Explorer. And that platform basically can capture the data of right now, we have 59 individual whimbrels that we're tracking. And so what happens is if one of these birds, when they fly up through the United States and they fly over what we call a MODIS tower in the US, they have these little nano tags on them. And when that nano tag pings, what it does is it's able to tell us how many thousands of miles that bird has flown, where that bird is going to stop to rest and refuel, and ultimately where that bird stops for the season. And so with those data, it enables us to then plot the network of lands and waters that this species needs as it traverses the Americas. And it also enables us to see what challenges those birds are encountering as they're moving along those migratory corridors. And this is what the Americas Flyway Initiative is enabling us to do. So I'll leave you with just a few closing thoughts before I hand it over. I don't have to tell anyone in this room or who's watching on our live stream that birds are an incredible source of joy and wonder to so many people in the world. They're found on every continent on Earth. And I have yet to meet a person who doesn't at least know what a bird is and have some knowledge or experience of birds. So tonight, I'd like to think about birds as our international ambassadors. And so wherever you live in the hemisphere, wherever you live in the world, let's remember that these amazing migratory journeys remind us that perhaps what we once thought was impossible is now possible, that we are all interconnected, and that like birds, we have to rise above our borders and our boundaries and our differences. So this is a launch of the Americas Flyways Initiative. And so I encourage us all to embrace the power of birds, to connect us, to inspire us, and to help us remember that the future is in all of our hands. Thanks. Bart.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Alicia. You've set the scene absolutely brilliantly. It is fabulous to be here in New York. I'm a bit of a migrant myself, so I'm coming from Cambridge, UK. But it's great to be here in this mad, crazy, noisy, wonderful city and to basically help launch this Flyways initiative. So I am going to show you a few little slides to help accompany this. Let's see if this works. There we go. Okay. So the first thing I should say actually is to pay tribute to Audubon for being at the forefront of bird conservation for more than BirdLife's been existing. So you've been around for 100 years. And of course, Kath, you've been leading the way in terms of greening investments across the whole of Latin America. And it's just fabulous to be collaborating with you on this Flyways initiative. And I wanted actually to start by just paying huge credit to everyone who's being involved in getting us to this point. I am merely a messenger. There's many people in this room. I'm not going to shout you all names all out. Who's done an enormous amount of work to get us to this point. So huge congratulations. There's a lot more to do, but it's a great, great start. Now, I did want to set a little bit of scene. I think my job is to give a bit more of a global context and then to go into a bit more detail about the Americas Flyway Initiative itself. But I also wanted to remind you or introduce you to BirdLife, because some of you may not know so much about BirdLife International. So we are the world's largest global partnership of nature conservation organizations. And as the slide shows, 120 independent countries, 120 partners in 116 countries around the world, all collaborating both nationally and globally to try and do the right thing for species and wherever they live. And we've been doing this for not quite the length of time that Audubon's been doing it, but I think that we've been around since 1922. And our backstory, I think, is relevant tonight, because we were born at the end of the successful campaign to outlaw the use of wild birds and feathers in the hat trade and ladies' fashion in places like the US, my country, UK, and Holland, and elsewhere in Europe. And essentially what we were doing at that time was mounting the first ever global footprint campaign, because the trade in wild birds and feathers was driving individual species to extinction, and we were trying to stop that. So we were successful then, but oh my goodness, we've got some challenges today, because as both Alicia and Elizabeth said, our planet is in crisis. We're facing a nature and climate emergency. And the reason why there are so many people in New York this week is because we're trying to unpack all of the complex challenges and try and find a solutions whereby we can potentially live in harmony with nature. But while the challenge might be incredibly complex, it's my belief that BirdLife is really well placed. We're uniquely placed in many ways to try and help tackle this crisis, because we're rooted in communities, we're rooted in countries, and we have a track record of having a positive impact for wildlife in those countries. So from my point of view, my belief is that BirdLife is at its best when the partners' voices are being heard by decision makers. That's when it's better for nature. It's better for nature when the practical conservation work being done with our partners like Audubon is being seen and showcased to inspire more to take action. And of course, it's better for nature if our partners' capacity and capability is built as well. And that's really the job of us as a secretariat. And I should say that it's wonderful to have two more of our partners in the room today. We have Hernan from Aves Argentina. Do you want to wave, Hernan? Maybe you'll see them on the Zoom. And also we have Pedro from Salve, Brazil. So it's wonderful to have two of our partners from the South joining us here today. And this is our team from Paraguay, again, rooted in community. So as Elizabeth said, one of the great wonders of the natural world is migration. And I'm going to build on the Whimbrel, and I'm going to show you an Arctic tern, because that's our logo, our mascot. And like the Whimbrel, it is an extraordinary migrant. It goes from pole to pole. I think the stats are it does something like 30,000 kilometers every year, going from its breeding grounds to its wintering grounds, which is just extraordinary. And our challenge, of course, is to try and save our shared birds wherever they go across the flyway, which is why I think the BirdLife partnership is so uniquely placed, because we do indeed have partners from Argentina and Chile all the way up to Canada. We have partners from Iceland down to South Africa, and therefore we can collaborate in unison to try and save our shared birds. So that's our challenge. And the challenge is getting much more challenging. So the North American scientists produced this extraordinary set of statistics to suggest that we now have 3 billion fewer birds today in North America than in 1970, which was when I was born. So it makes you sort of jar to think about the lost heritage that's happened on our watch, something like 30% decline over the last 53 years. And it's not just that the declines are taking place in North America. Globally, through our State of the World's Birds publication, which we launched last year, the statistics are very, very similar. Something like half of all wild birds across the world are declining. 1 in 8 species are at risk of extinction, and that's going to include hundreds of migratory birds. So our challenge, therefore, is to try and rise to, well, deal with this huge problem. And the point is that despite our best intentions, our current efforts have been good, but they've just not been sufficient. So we've got to find new creative ways to do things differently, to be bold, to be courageous, to form more collaborations. And that is what the Americas Flyway Initiative is all about. So it's worth saying that this initiative is not the only one that's taking place with the Development Bank at the moment. And indeed, some of the thinking has been inspired by work that we're doing in Asia, in the East Asian Australasian Fly with our Asian Development Bank, which is trying to drive between $2 to $3 billion worth of investment into supporting wetland conservation across the whole of that flyway to save incredibly threatened species like the spoon-billed sandpiper. And our own initiative here, which we're launching today, has similarly lofty ambitions. You heard from Alicia right at the beginning about the long-term aim, what we're trying to achieve. You know, to my mind, that's all about trying to reverse the declines of migratory birds while at the same time providing the needs that people need in terms of infrastructure and development in a way that's harmonious for nature. And the short-term objective is that I believe that by 2032, we're looking to mobilize about 2 to 3 billion in order to try and invest in something like 30 sites, which is going to be providing natural climate-based solutions and also ecosystem services to help people and wildlife. So there's a lot in those statements. Let me unpack them a bit and basically outline the 5 key elements that we believe are going to be crucial to try and bring to life the Americas Flyway Initiative. 3 of them have been mentioned by Alicia already, actually, the first one being science. So obviously what we've got to try and do is we've got to work out where are the most important places for these migratory birds and which ones are the most at risk. And the good news is I believe that colleagues in Audubon and BirdLife now have done the analysis. They've looked at all the sites, they've looked at where the species are, and there's something like a long list of sites that we're hoping to protect, like 1,000 sites, which potentially can drive investment. We've got to get that short list down. And all of that information, I think, is going to be made available on the website pretty soon. And the second thing we're going to be doing is all around the technical side, as Alicia said right at the beginning. We're going to be producing playbooks or handbooks, basically trying to provide best guidance about how you do development in harmony with wild birds. And we're going to be drawing upon lots of different sources to try and make sure that we get the right green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in place. And what do I mean by that? I mean investing in nature, which helps provide clean water, locks up carbon, helps us protect us from floods, all the things that we need for our own species to survive. So that's the second thing. We've got science, we've got technology, and then the third thing, of course, is resources. So as we all know, there is a huge funding gap in terms of meeting our global biodiversity requirements. So we've got to think differently to mobilize resources, which is why we have been thinking of innovative finance solutions to help with the flyway. And so CAF have been working with another of our partners, the Green Growth Institute, to try and develop a flyway bond, which will hopefully drive that new investment that we so desperately need. And then the fourth thing is monitoring. We've got to know whether all these investments are actually having impact. And that's why we're going to be producing a flyway health index, and that's going to be helping us work out whether things are working or not. Because if we don't do the monitoring, then we won't know whether actually the whole scheme's been successful. And the fifth thing is awareness. We have to try wherever we can to raise awareness about the wonder of migratory birds and the importance of the places where they live. Because if people are aware, they're more likely to care. And if they care, they are more likely to act. And that really is our challenge. And together, what we believe will happen is that for the first time, nature will be hardwired into thinking about national development priorities. And if we can do it in the Americas, we need to do it across the whole of the world. because that will be the real test of whether we're being successful. So what's next, and how can you help? So sneak preview earlier from Alicia. So I think that there's been some identification of some pilot projects, and my belief at the moment is that we're looking to develop a small portfolio of landscapes and sites across 6 countries in Latin America at the moment, in Chile, in Peru, in Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica. And the idea, these will be the pilot sites, where we try and test these new techniques. And our hope is that the playbooks will be ready by the end of this year, and at the same time, we'll be able to drive the investment in these pilot sites. And then our desire is for every year, about 2 or 3 sites will receive investment and supported by all these playbooks. And then alongside the Flyways bond, what we're hoping to achieve also is to establish a new re-granting mechanism to support civil society, local communities, indigenous peoples get involved in flyway conservation. And we're probably going to start that as our ambition is for that to be a global endeavor. We'll probably start it in Asia, and then our hope is that we will then transfer it across into the Americas and other parts of the world. So to preserve these incredible places, to preserve the wonder of migration, to preserve our migratory species, to ensure that the people who call these places home, we have to think and act very, very differently. We have to be bold, and we have to take risks. And I think that is exactly what the Americas Flyways Initiative is trying to achieve. And I just want to repeat my huge congratulations to everyone for getting us to this point. There's a lot more to do, but my belief is that with the incredible partnership that we've got, with this extraordinary set of partners that we have within BirdLife, that together not only can we deliver for migrants, to deliver for people who are living in these places, but we can show the world that it is possible to live in harmony with nature. Thank you very much.
So welcome. My name is Aurelio Ramos. I'm the Senior Vice President for Audubon Americas with National Audubon Society. I'm very, very, very excited to be here with you on this launch of the Americas Flyways Initiative. You know, after several months of experts and teams structuring the Americas Flyways, we are, and this includes also some other partners that I want to mention, like the GGI and Biota, who have been helping us develop a lot of the tools that were mentioned by Martin. Last week, for those of you who are very interested on understanding the sort of the details of what Martin explained of the pilot projects, what are those playbooks, what sectors are we going to be investing, we already have those maps available on the website. So the scientists have been developing all of that science with many partners on the region. All of that has been the work on the structuring, and we're ready right now to start investing on real conservation on the ground. And that's what the pilots is just, we're calling them pilots in the sense that these are the first investments that are going to be moving forward in Ecuador and in Chile, you know, are where we are moving forward. We want to see real conservation of these hotels and restaurants that the birds need on their journeys flying down. So this is a celebration, and we're going to dive into the panel. So I'm going to ask Alicia, Elizabeth, and Martin to sit over here. And I assume I can move with my mic. So I'm going to start with Alicia. Nowadays, the value of natural assets, as an example, wetlands or forest, is better understood. But there is still a huge gap to guarantee their conservation and their management. What can the Americas Flyways Initiative and other organizations do to generate more bankable nature-based solutions projects?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't know if it works. Yes?
No.
No? Hello? Yes? No, this is the most difficult question to answer, because I would say that the main challenge with this kind of initiatives has to do with the internal work we are doing in CAF as a bank. We are not used to work with this kind of partners. And so we feel very excited because now we can really identify what are the projects we need to develop. And what our role is to make these projects bankable, as you say. And this is not easy because sometimes we tend to simplify the message. The question is not only to protect the birds, but to use this indicator to really identify what are the spaces where we need to work, and then to develop further the needs. The challenge then is to really make institutions, our teams, understand that this is not, this is an investment. What we have to do is to really work with these initiatives as an investment. All the resources we can invest in protecting the places where birds need to rest is an investment that really improves the quality of the spaces and improves the quality of lives. So I would say then that the main challenge is to really change our minds to make possible that all these bird indicators that we are using with all the technology and all the science that we are using is translated into economic terms to really prove that this is it doesn't sound very well, but it's true that we need to make it to translate that in economic terms to really, as you say, work with these projects as bankable projects. So this is the main challenge. We are working on that. We are making good progress. As Mark said, we are now working in Ecuador and in Chile and identifying other projects. But I would say that the most challenging question right now is to move forward from science to money.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. It's very interesting. How do we make the business case for that conservation, and how we value not only in money but also, in biodiversity, social, all of those impacts in the projects. So now, Martin, I'm going to move to you. We heard on the introduction that birds are very powerful in many ways. Can you share a concrete example of how bird conservation has had a positive impact on people's quality of life and the protection of critical ecosystems across the hemisphere?
I wanted to give one general, then one specific, if it's okay. But I think the general was that many people in many countries around the world, I think, found enormous solace from nature through the pandemic, and therefore reinforcing all the statistics that are out there about the physical and mental health benefits of contact with nature. So that's the one general thing. I think the specific example is probably what was happening, the impact of Hurricane Sandy on large parts of the northeast coast of the States in 2013-14. And I think it was pretty clear there that the enormous damage that was done, something like £70 billion worth of $770 billion worth of damage done, and of course huge damage to important shorebird habitat. But I think that was the case that something like $600 million worth of bills to damage was basically foregone as a result of soft sea defences. So we all know, all around the world, if you've got good soft sea defences, good salt marsh habitat, intertidal habitat, if it's functioning well, then that will actually reduce the impact of big tidal surges and storms. And that certainly happened in parts of New Jersey, I believe. But this challenge is going to get more and more difficult. So we've got a team at the moment in the Pacific Islands, desperately trying to restore some of those habitats, trying to remove invasive species which are actually sort of crowding out some of the native fauna, and trying to restore those habitats because they're in the front line of the climate crisis, as indeed any coastal community. So if we can get the investments right, build the resilience of those habitats, that's going to help people. And if we do it right for people, I'm sure we'll do it right for birds as well.
Fantastic. So these sites will have benefits for birds, people, and nature. No, it's the magic. Elizabeth, in the context of international collaboration to protect migratory birds, what are some of the most significant challenges faced, and how can they be overcome through international cooperation and investments done from multilateral development banks or others?
Well, the focus of the America Flyways Initiative is to fund projects at the very beginning, right? Fund them on their initial stages and to find projects that are going to have significant impact. So we define impact, our collaborative defines impact as addressing the key threats, improving bird habitat, and also improving the lives of people and benefiting local economies. And so why is this important? Why do we care about this? Well, first of all, you heard from all of us that birds are in decline across the Americas, across the world. So that's key. But also fewer than half of all migratory species are well represented in current protected areas. And so this is a big problem. And really what we want to do, that you mentioned this in your introductory remarks, we want to make sure that birds become a priority species in countries' 30 by 30 efforts as they develop their 30 by 30 plans. And this is going to really require that we're working at scales, everything from a very local community scale, benefiting local communities, but also up to a multinational scale. So this is a huge problem. We've got to work at the scale of a problem. We've got to work at a scale bigger than a single government or a country or even a continent. Frankly, that's what the initiative is about. So that's really important to get in at the very beginning of a project to make sure that it's well structured and well thought about. But also, we know there's money out there, and we know that partnerships with development banks, particularly with CAF, these are great because they can help us scale the work. I mean, that's really one of the beauties of working. And by the way, I know CAF is committed to becoming the green bank of Latin America. Maybe you already are considered the green bank of Latin America. You will be if you're not. And so it's a wonderful partnership and really, really important. And so we need good projects. We need good projects that are done in the right ways that benefit people and benefit birds. And so the beauty of working together like this in this type of initiative is that we can develop projects that are well structured, they're well prepared, and they can also have long-term sustainability goals, which is really, really key.
Fantastic. Alicia, can you share details about the prospects of the first pilot projects that will be supported by the Americas Flyways Initiative, and how they contribute to the overall vision of CAF becoming the green bank of Latin America?
We are now working with projects that have a very important meaning in a learning process too. First, in Chile, we are identifying one project with the wetlands. This is something very important because what we are learning is that thanks to birds, that these wetlands are having problems. We need to invest resources on that. So this could be one very important project where birds are helping us to identify actions. But there are other kind of projects. The Ecuador project you mentioned is a project that has to do on how to make possible that our projects are bird friendly, which is different. It's not exactly birds as indicators, but in this case, we need to protect birds also in all these areas that have been identified with all the methodologies of Audubon and BirdLife International, the areas that are really very sensitive. In this case, this is a electric transmission project for the shrimp. What we are doing is to go beyond compliance. Of course, we need to make sure that all our projects follow the environmental safeguards that we have. And this, of course, has to do with the protection of environment in general. What we are doing here is to go beyond, thanks to these playbooks we are developing to identify techniques that make possible that our projects do not harm birds. So this is important because we here have a learning process that could be useful for other kind of infrastructures. So these are the two projects where we are working now in a very deep way, and we hope that we can replicate them in the future with your help. And of course, this is really very interesting. And I think I would say that internally, we are working a lot because I was mentioning before that people, when I talk about this American Flyways Initiative internally in GAF, they usually say, oh, this is pretty, this is pretty. And I don't like them saying, this is pretty. This is not pretty. This is very difficult to really make a bankable project out of this analysis. So that's why I think this is a learning process, and this is very important for us because we will be able to really invest our money and mobilize it, not our money, but our shareholders' money, and to mobilize resources to really protect these ecosystems.
Thank you very much, Alicia, for that. We try with the teams to imagine, if what you can do in a place like Chile on a very important wetland, or Ecuador in another very important coastal area, and multiply by 30, this will be transformational, and the amounts of resources that are being plugged into this project. So thank you very much for that. So Martin, why is it so important to care for birds to promote development and resilience in the hemisphere? In the current context of biodiversity loss and climate change crisis that you mentioned in your intervention, what is the fundamental role of birds in addressing these challenges?
It's a great question, but I think in a way it comes back to the fact that birds are perhaps the best barometer of what's happening. And if birds are in trouble, other bits of biodiversity are in trouble, and it means our own species is in trouble. And if we think about the big theme that's been going on this week in New York, it's being the fact that destroying nature is contributing about a fifth of the problem in terms of climate change. By protecting, restoring nature is probably going to give you about a third of the answer. So, and that means we're talking about reducing harm, stopping the destruction of nature. We're talking about looking at regenerative agriculture, making sure that that is more sympathetic to nature. And of course, we're talking about large-scale restoration. And if we do that, those three things together, then nature will be coming to the table and making a big contribution. And then just one other thing, building on Alicia's point. The agenda of decarbonizing energy is just enormous. Talking about tripling renewable energy over the next decade, absolutely vital to do so. But we've got to find ways to do that in harmony with wild birds to cause needless harm. So these techniques we're going to be deploying will, I think, absolutely help demonstrate that it is possible. And we've got as indeed Audubon has, loads of examples about how you deliver renewable energy while causing needless harm to birds. And we've got to demonstrate that's possible, because the tripling of renewable energy in a decade got to mean we've got some birds left at the end of it.
Thank you, Martin. Elizabeth, since the Americas Flyways Initiative promotes the conservation of migratory birds, how can investments from the Americas Flyways Initiative generate tangible benefits for local communities in Latin America and the Caribbean, in addition to the benefits that it provides to the environment? Mm-hmm.
I'm going to build on your answer, Martin, for this one, which is to talk a little bit about a concept called nature-based solutions. And so, as you said, we know nature-based solutions, also known as natural climate solutions, can provide about 30% of the answer to what we need to do for climate meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. So this is using natural systems to sequester and store carbon. And the real beauty of using natural climate solutions is they have a lot of co-benefits. So they have co-benefits for people. Not only are you sequestering and storing carbon, you're also improving habitat, in this case for birds, and you're also often improving local economies and benefiting people. And so one of the and you mentioned this, one of the most important ways that we can use natural climate solutions in this context with the American Flyways Initiative work is through accelerating a transition to regenerative agriculture. And so what is a regenerative agriculture? It's a way to have folks think about how to do agriculture and how to farm in ways that improves long-term livelihoods of people. And so typically when you embark in a regenerative agriculture project, what you're doing is you are reducing costs for the farmers, you're improving yield and quality of yield, you're basically helping them mitigate against market volatility and mitigate against extreme climate events. And then ultimately, you're able to introduce new revenue streams, green revenue streams to farmers that didn't have availability of this, typically through things like carbon credits, which are compensating them for sequestering carbon in the soils and in the vegetation. And so when I was down in Colombia in the spring with you, Aurelio, and some of the team, it was really fun to see some of the regenerative agriculture projects that we're doing as part of the Americas Flyways Initiative. So I remember visiting a farm in Rosal, and we went out and we saw hundreds of birds in a field that was using special crop rotation methods. And then we went to the Cauca Valley, and we went and visited some farmers and heard about some silvopastorale techniques that they are using. So when I use that term, what I mean is having cattle ranchers plant trees in the pastures. This is a huge benefit. It provides shade for the cows, it provides better soil health, and it helps to sequester carbon. And so we spoke to these folks who are ranching. They typically, and they were telling us all the benefits that they have. So they have increased income, they have better benefits, they're typically grazing fewer cattle on their property, but they're having a greater return, and so making more money. And so we met this wonderful farmer and rancher, Sandra, who showed us her ranch and was just extolling how much this had improved her life and her livelihood, and not only her ranch, but also downstream, the communities. They had improved water, more reliable water, cleaner water. And so these strategies of using nature-based solutions, natural climate solutions, I think of them as a win-win-win. So you basically are improving the lives of people, you're improving the quality of habitat for animals, and in this case, birds. And then, of course, you are sequestering carbon, which is absolutely key for combating the climate crisis, which is, which is why many of us are here because of New York Climate Week. So this is one of the examples of working with local community and doing the types of projects that we're talking about and benefiting people at a very, very local level. And we heard that right from their mouths when we were in Colombia this spring.
Thank you very much. We can continue forever on this, but we want to give a big applause to this amazing leader. We're going to be moving now to the closing remarks. And it is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce Juan Pablo del Valle. I've known Juan Pablo for several years. I have worked with and for him in the past. He's an amazing leader and visionary. Juan Pablo is the chairman of Orbia since 2011. He has moved Orbia from being a local chemical corporation to a global leader in agriculture technologies, aiming to feed the world sustainably, to better manage water systems, and to make cities more livable and resilient. He's Mexican, he's from the region, and he's coming here to give us the closing remarks. So, Juan Pablo, thank you.
Thank you very much, Aurelio. You may question yourself, what is a businessman doing here? And I'm just honored and very happy to be in this not pretty event, Alicia, but very important, impactful, and relevant event. The first thing I want to do is to congratulate you, Audubon, Elizabeth, Gav, Alicia, BirdLife, Martin, for this groundbreaking hemispheric initiative that can really change in a very positive way things for our planet and for millions of people. I stand with you today as an aspirational conservationist and bird watcher, and I'll explain why. and of course also as a businessman. But let me tell you a little bit about the aspirational conservationist and aspirational bird watcher. This journey started almost 8 years ago when I joined the Latin American Conservation Council. And during our annual meetings, we had some bird watching activities, which, to tell you the truth, 8 years ago, I thought they were boring and non-important. But step by step, I started feeling the excitement and curiosity, peace, like harmony that brings watching birds, and then learning again that it's not only something beautiful and pretty, it's something very important. We all know that it is thanks to birds that flowers are pollinated. We all know that it is thanks to birds that our forests are enriched with seeds that are distributed by these amazing animals. And this is how I was captivated by birds. Last year, I was bird watching in Petén, Guatemala, and the guide, who was a bird watcher actually, ornithologist from Cornell University, but also a Mayan and community leader. He told me, Juan Pablo, I want you to know that if you protect birds, you protect everything. And I thought about it, and I think he's totally right. It is really incredible to see how a community like you, 3 organizations together like you, are trying to make change. And almost everything has been said during the panel and during your interventions, but there's some things that I just want to contribute. You said 5 things that are relevant. I want to add that adding more business leaders into this mix is incredibly important. Why? Of course, resources, but CAF has significant resources. But business leaders are also very pragmatic and make things happen. They're also binary and lack sometimes a holistic view of things. And this is where we can be much more sensitive by interacting with organizations like you. In my business, Orbia, Aurelio explained a little bit about it. We do drip irrigation. And I was very proudly explaining to Aurelio how drip irrigation can be super important for reducing rice methane emissions, which are around 1 billion tons of CO2 per year when you convert methane into CO2 to zero by changing flood irrigation, which at the end of the day, these paddies are flooded and the organic soil below it rots and creates methane, which creates the CO2, can be reduced to zero with drip irrigation, which doesn't need any flooding. And Aurelio told me, well, yes, but do you know that in some places, having this flooding paddies is relevant for birds? And I said, you know what? I had no idea. And this is how we business people think we have to reduce emissions to zero, but we lack this holistic vision. So the only important message that I want to convey is let's bring more business people into this mix. And it's important to congratulate you, but also you know that it's important to know that this is only the beginning. Making things happen and more in a project of this nature, of this size, will be incredibly important. And from this mix of being a business person and an aspirational conservationist and bird watcher, I've learned that if there is one essential thing, other than the ones that you said already, these are local communities and leaders like Benito. It is these people that will be the guardians of whatever project we entail. It is these people that we need to support, that we need to make sure that they develop their communities. And I'm very glad to see that this initiative, which is done at a grand scale, does a different for the planet and does a different for people. So without anything further to say, congratulations again, and thank you very, very much.
So without any further, we want to invite you to celebrate. There's going to be drinks and Latin music. So we hope you enjoy it. And thank you very much for being here with us. It has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.